Good afternoon, everybody. Hopefully everybody's enjoying the conference so far. If you are here for establishing the pillars of a successful CloudSec program, you are in the right location. So thanks for joining us today. My name is JD Sherry. I'm Vice President of Cloud Security for Optiv. We are heavily focused on running end-to-end security programs for many of you in the audience today, as well as other prospective clients. And today we're going to walk through some of the core tenets of what's going on right now at the state of cloud security, the way we see it evolving, and then I've been joined on the stage with a couple of close friends. We'll have Krishna, founder and chief scientist from Netskope, following me, and then we'll have Ann, former head of US CERT and current CTO for Strategic Cyber Ventures, come up and talk a little bit about the threat landscape as it pertains to cloud computing as well. So I'm going to take about 10 minutes to frame up the landscape, and then I'm going to turn it over to Krishna, and we'll walk through what he sees out there as far as it fanning out and attacking within cloud ecosystems, as well as it pertains to malware attacks. So one of the interesting things, somebody turned 10 this year. Does anybody know whose 10th birthday it is? It's not my son or any of my kids or anything like that, but as it pertains to cloud computing. Anybody have any thoughts? Winner, chicken dinner, AWS, okay? So S3, the storage platform, is now 10 years old, and what that means essentially is we've seen a pretty consistent adoption of overall cloud services, all right, and ultimately public cloud capabilities, which is evolving into hybrid cloud computing for many of our clients today. So with that, you know, the other interesting thing too is they've reduced their prices 51 times since they launched in 2006. So obviously we work with a lot of partners, many vendors in the audience today. Probably not a lot of those folks have reduced their prices to you 51 times in basically the last 10 years. So what does that mean? Well, we're seeing more and more people adopt these models, figuring out the right strategy, and the security of this is of the utmost importance, and that's what we're going to walk through a little bit today. So many folks are starting to see the evolution of cloud computing as the cost of not doing it puts them at a competitive disadvantage, okay? So figuring out what workloads go into the cloud, the classification of those data sets, certainly the identity and the access of those workloads is pivotal. And with that, we're seeing more and more people lean to the adoption of hybrid cloud computing models, and the security and sanctity of those workloads become a top priority for their overall extension of InfoSec strategy. So ultimately, much has been focused on the investment of existing what I would call next generation data centers that is now transforming and extending out into these public cloud ecosystems. Most have adopted SaaS-based ecosystems, okay? Office 365 is a very, very common platform that we see folks moving and migrating to. You know, the old adage, friends don't let friends build data centers. You know, I would also say as a former and recovering CIO that I would not technically want to be in the email business anymore. So we're seeing more and more clients leveraging Office 365 as a pivot from their traditional email and collaboration and productivity platforms, and figuring out how to secure those is a key aspect. So, you know, we often hear the term next generation, blah, 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 next generation data center. Really, to me, cloud is an extension of, and really the evolution of next generation data center. So as we look at workloads moving out, it's very real and very apparent, and this is according to a couple of partners that we have, in this case SkyHigh, we'll have Netskope following up, but ultimately these workloads are moving out of our traditional data centers today, but I think the proverbial cloud horse has left the barn and it doesn't have a saddle. So security really is that saddle. As those workloads move out, we've got to think strategically on how we secure those. Quick snapshot of the industry. So we saw in the keynote the overall consumption of Azure identity as well as compute service there was pretty astonishing. Ultimately, Gartner says by the end of this year, public cloud services at about $204 million marketplace. Much of that in the adoption of SaaS-based capabilities that you see here, as well as infrastructure as a service, which we mentioned with Azure, Google Compute, and AWS. What that means in the overall big scheme of things is we've got to figure out, with the acceleration of the business consuming these, what is the governance, what is the security, what is the compliance posture for all of this as we move out. So for example, the CASB, which stands for Cloud Access Security Broker market, is estimated to be about a $500 million marketplace by 2017. And this really is the capacity in which organizations are figuring out who's accessing what services. Are they incorporating the right DLP, encryption, and governance capabilities as they consume those services? And the proverbial shadow IT is a big component of all that as well. So as we kind of look at 7 kind of key tenets, and there are certainly others, but to boil this down and keep it simple, stupid, we kind of see this evolution of understanding your overall risk appetite, right? Even the Department of Defense, if we have any folks from there, have a data classification services that say X amount of data with this classification level will never go in a public cloud infrastructure, right? So understand what that risk appetite is, adopt a control baseline. We work quite significantly with the Cloud Security Alliance and looking at their cloud controls matrix as an element of mapping some of your regulation and requirements such as ISO, NIST, PCI. All those things have to basically be an extension of what you do today, the regulations and compliance, but figure out how that maps and applies within a cloud ecosystem. Learning curves, as we know, DevOps have changed the way we staff and we skill and we train up folks. So in many cases, we're seeing the mashup of these roles that we traditionally have on premise, consuming cloud-based models, whether it's software as a service, platform as a service, or infrastructure as a service, is something that doesn't just happen overnight. So there's got to be a lot of education, a lot of training, and primarily from not just how to consume these, but basically how are you using these and how are you securing these types of services. Centralized procurement, we have a lot of large customers that say we don't do cloud. And typically what they mean by that is there probably isn't a formal infrastructure as a service initiative with Azure or AWS. However, when you really dig into it and discover and see the transparency of these services, you quickly realize that many people are doing the shadow IT. They're out consuming things with the credit card. Our marketing folks are probably the biggest offenders of that in our organization, where they're navigating around traditional IT services because it's easier to go out and pay with something with a credit card. So that's important to understand from centralized procurement and getting online with that. Understand the existing usage of services and determine if those match an acceptable use policy. In a couple of weeks, you'll be seeing a research blueprint out of our strategy and research group that focuses on SaaS-based security that will walk you through some of these maturity levels around understanding existing usage and what you can do. So be on the lookout from that at optiv.com. The reason why we're here, number 6, okay? I think everybody would agree, number 1 priority for us as InfoSec and IT professionals is data. Know thy data, protect thy data. I would say 1A is identity, okay? And that's why we're here to learn some of that tradecraft and understand how we can do that across hybrid cloud ecosystems and public cloud services. So the other thing too that's interesting, anybody have any connection to anybody in Australia this past week and what was going on with the storms in Sydney? Massive waves. I've got some friends on Facebook from my old days at Trend Micro that were showing me these waves crashing over the beaches at Manly Beach, which is an absolutely beautiful beach. Well, AWS was impacted in Sydney because of those storms. So what you have to realize is just because you're consuming cloud services doesn't immediately indicate that you're going to have a DR plan ready built. It's certainly helpful, but you also have to architect your ecosystems to basically understand that, hey, if I'm in certain zones or regions that get hit, I have to make sure that I have other areas in my AWS infrastructure that are redundant as part of my overall design and my architecture. So we've got elements of the maturity model that really let you walk through where you need to be in your evolution and your journey. So a lot of clients, we go in and we talk to them, and they are doing elements of cloud, but they might not have a formal cloud security strategy associated with it as an extension of their InfoSec program, okay? And as we look and evolve and rapidly adopt this infrastructure, there are kind of key things that let you walk through up to be in a strategic state of cloud consumption and ultimately doing that in a secure and sound way. So, I would end with this. On the strategic side, again, next generation data center includes cloud. And I think, although maybe some of you don't have a cloud security strategy today, or you're not adopting cloud services because you've got a large on-premise infrastructure investment, it makes perfect sense that you are figuring out how to evolve your strategy into a hybrid cloud computing model, and what are the existing investments today that will port to the cloud and what won't. Because we have a tremendous amount of partners that work with us on a day-to-day basis at Optiv. Obviously, 300 plus partners and basically a variety of different strategies when it comes to InfoSec. Some of them are a little bit more advanced in their cloud computing models, okay, and what they're doing with their roadmaps to be more cloud friendly. So those are things that have to come into consideration as you have investment. So basically understanding where you are with the consumption, but more importantly, even before that, if you can, and very often people can't do this because the day-to-day workload gets in the way, create a strategy document that basically brings the stakeholders together who's going to consume these services between IT, legal, security, and more importantly, the business units that are out there wanting to accelerate their efforts into the cloud. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Krishna. He's going to walk us through a little bit about some of these advanced malware attacks that they are seeing within their platform and these various SaaS-based services as well as infrastructure as a service. And with that being said, I will go ahead and turn it over to Krishna.